Hey, welcome back to another episode of Paranormal Now. I'm really excited to share. Now I have 2 promo codes for you to use to become an exclusive KGRA-DB platform member. These codes for the 30% discount are good for 1 whole year. If you want to become a KGRA-DB platform member, the monthly code to use is PARANOW. This gives you 30% off the monthly membership subscription. If you want to do a yearly, the yearly is $75.49. Add the promo code for 30% off, and that is PARANOW21. So again, whether you go for the monthly or you go for the yearly subscription, PARANOW for the monthly, PARANOW21 for the yearly, and you get 30% off. We are going to bring you some awesome content. Not just exclusive archives of all of our shows, but the podcast, the archives, everything from Richard Dolan's show, Linda Moulton Howe, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and those are only the classics. What about all the shows that are happening now, like Peter Robbins' Meanwhile Here on Earth, my show, Entity Voices, Renee Barnett's Night Vision? There's so much, and beyond that, we are going to do exclusive behind-the-scenes interviews and extras that you can only get as a KGRA-DB member. We will be bringing to you conferences, symposiums, fairs, paranormal and ufological video series that you will not get anywhere else. So I hope you'll join me as a part of this really exciting endeavor. KGRA-DB's platform is going to be the next big paranormal platform. So jump on board now while you can. Let's cruise the cosmos together and get those early promotion codes. The monthly for the $6.99 per month, PARANOW. And for the annual, that's $75.49 per year, it's PARANOW21. So to put that in perspective, if you do the yearly at $75.49 for 30% off, that's actually a $22.64 discount. So that's really a huge saving. And if you're doing the monthly, then you're looking at $2.09. So you're saving quite a bit every month if you use the PARANOW for the monthly or the PARANOW21 for the annual code. Again, I'm really excited. We're going to bring amazing, novel, and unique content that is really distinct from the rest of the content out there that we typically see in the paranormal world. We are like family at KGRA, and that's how we treat everything. We care about these topics. We're passionate about it. We're sympathetic, and we love you. So please join us. I hope to see you there. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Paranormal Now. However you are and whenever you are, welcome, good souls, to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. Joining me tonight is Zen Benefiel, and he is the author of Stubbing My Big Toe on Purpose. We will be discussing science, consciousness, wellness, and we will go as far as metaphysics will allow us, which means extraterrestrial, interdimensional, and what have you. So it's going to be a fun Paranormal Now night, to be sure. And I have some really exciting news. So we now have a Paranormal Now show KGRA-DB promo code. So if you are interested in this show and all the other great shows on KGRA and you are thinking about becoming a member, you can now put in the code that I have to give you, which is the Paranormal Now code. And that is PARANOW21. That's PARANOW21. And I'll put the link in the comment section down below right now as we speak. And when you go to the website, the link is there. Just type in Paranormal Now 21 as you sign up, and you'll get 30% discount for 1 year. 30% discount to be a KGRADB.com member. So not only do you have all of these amazing podcasts and live radio shows on KGRA DB, but there will be additional content. I know Bill Skywatcher and Race have talked a lot about this on the producer's show, but there will be more live events and video content behind the scenes that you definitely don't want to miss. So again, that promo code is PARANOW21. All right. And of course, in the last 30 minutes, the KGRA DB hotline is open. So if you want to call in and ask our guest your question for him or for myself, or if you just want to share your own story of perhaps personal growth, or any kind of metaphysical experience that you've had, please do. And that number is 1-855-472-5483 or 85 KGRA live. All right, now I'm going to have a sip of my coffee here because it has been a really intense time. We are going through a transition, leaving New York City, and we are moving out of the city. Not quite country bumpkins, but it kind of feels that way. So it's in a very exciting time for us. We'll be a little bit closer to nature, and I'll give you more information on that as we go, updates, and the new studio, which I'm really excited to share about. All right, so if you want to find out more information or follow me on social, you can go to facebook.com/paranormalnowradio, on Twitter @paranormal_now, or on Instagram @paranormalnow. And of course, you can go to KGRA DB's YouTube channel and check out all the other shows and content coming to you. And again, that is only going to be available for a limited time. Eventually, all those videos will be a part of the KGRA DB membership, so you don't want to miss out on that. Okay, so let's bring our guest on, Zen Benefiel. Zen, welcome to Paranormal Now.
Hey, thank you very much, Alan, and congratulations on your new digs, man. That's got to be exciting.
Thank you. Yes, very, very exciting. A little nerve-wracking. We've been city rats for a long time now, so it's going to be. We look forward to that fresh air, the peace and quiet, and all that. But we're not too far from the city, so we'll still be coming here quite a lot.
Yeah, I grew up in the country and moved to the city. I grew up in rural Indiana and moved to Phoenix.
So you've been around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dramatic.
Yeah, we did a stint out in LA for a short time, and it was not our city. I'll just say that. So we turned tail pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how about you? You're in Arizona, and what's it like there right now?
Oh, it's 108 and a bit humid. We're in our monsoon season, of course, and we have the occasional haboob, which is basically just a big dust storm. This year, though, we've had rain, which is uncommon.
Yeah, the weather's been so odd this past year, and that's why I was curious.
Well, it goes to reason. We were told years ago that we were having some weather changes and with polar shifts and all that kinds of stuff, weather patterns are going to change. It's just science, we just don't understand it all. We just experience it in process and wonder, well, gosh, what the heck's going on? Well, this is how it happens. Oregon just had a heat wave, and they've got largest, or last I heard anyway, they had the largest brush fire in the country, 740 square miles or something like that.
It's insane. And in Europe too, especially Eastern Southern Europe, there are fires raging there that were just so uncommon. And of course, here and there are, aspects of arson that are occurring, but on average, it's far beyond the usual suspect.
Europe got hit with a bunch of rain a month ago or so. And,
sure.
That's
Germany. Yeah, I forget what region, but in Germany, there was some serious flooding.
Yeah, that was one of them.
Yeah. So I want to put you on full screen so everyone can see your myriad of books behind you on your brilliant green screen. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your evolution. How did you come to the place you are now? Because I do want to focus on spiritual growth and bettering ourselves. But, intertwined in all of that, for me at least, is, my fascination with the unknown, metaphysical world, the world between worlds. So tell us about your background and how you came to be.
Well, the first of all, the insatiable curiosity and fearlessness that basically began as a child. I was orphaned and adopted young. And then my sister came into my life when I was four, not quite 4.5. And then my parents decided it was time that, of course, she was adopted too. And my parents decided it was time to tell me what adoption was. And even at that time, it spun me inward with some very deep questions about who my parents, real, parents were, and if I had parents in heaven, right? Because I was going to Sunday school at the time, and you get all that kind of stuff. And
Sure.
it's like, I'm curious. So, and then one night I was standing on the landing of our stairway in our house. We had a 2-story house, small town in Indiana, and the main road was, maybe 40 foot away. And so I'm looking out over the porch, and I've got my hands and my chin and my hands or elbows on the windowsill. And all of a sudden, and it's dark, I'm waiting for Dad to get back from the store. Mom's down at the bottom of the stairs watching TV, and it's not real loud. And all of a sudden I hear this deep booming voice say, "Hey, you." And I, rather than engage it, I immediately spun around and I asked my mother if she heard that voice. And she said, "No, what voice?" I said, "The voice says, 'Hey, you.'" She goes, "No, I didn't hear a voice. Must have been a peeping Tom." And we had one, I guess. And so in town, a small town. And so at that point, I realized that there was something else going on. And just on my own, I would stand in front of the windows at night with the lights on inside and not be able to see out. And I would project that same "Hey, you" out telepathically, and I would wait for a return. And it took a while for it to return. And I think that was probably due to my own thinking and not just listening, right? Sending it out, listening, because our mind gets in the way of stuff really easy.
Sure.
And when we're thinking, we can't hear at that level. So I learned very young how to be quiet, still, and anticipate that return. And it came. And in a way, I didn't realize at the time, but it really helped me work through the fear of the unknown initially. And then we moved to another house. My father
Zen,
had, yeah.
Let me just ask you, did that help you? You said get through the unknown. Did that help you process what adoption is, or how do those two things interrelate?
Well, the unknown was in my standing in front of a window in the darkness, the unknown being beyond it, and then having to learning how to communicate with that voice. And at that time, it really didn't have anything to do with the adoption. It wasn't a concern to me because my parents loved me. It was obvious that, it was a wonderful life. And I eventually did meet my birth parents. My father I met at a UFO discussion group in Phoenix, and neither one of us knew who it was. This was in 1989. And we met each other, felt connected, and he invited me up to his cabin in Prescott because there was some discussion groups up there that he thought I might enjoy. Yeah. And so I spent the weekend with him. And
that's an uncanny coincidence, isn't it, to have that shared interest?
When you ask questions and you're patient for the answers, most things come. It just may not be in the time that you anticipate them. Right. And I've had multiple things like that happen in my lifetime. It's just you ask and you let go and trust that it's going to come. I think that's the key.
Well, what's the difference between asking and putting an intention out there?
Well, asking is you actually ask, and then the intention is staying in that asking place where, let me reframe that. You move from an asking place to an anticipatory place.
Right? So you're expecting.
Anticipating, and that's different than expectations.
Okay.
Right? Because you don't know when it's going to happen. It's just this loose trust and faith that it will at some point.
Okay.
And you don't know. Right? So,
but you don't clearly believe. You wouldn't ask if you didn't believe, right?
True. but maybe not, right? A lot of people ask for stuff and they don't necessarily believe that it's going to happen, but they ask anyway because they're in a chaotic place in their lives and they're asking
Or
for help.
desperate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't necessarily in a desperate place. It was just that, gosh, I'd like to know, and if it's available, could I please? Right. Yeah. So after meeting Dad, I didn't know again. And that was in 1989. 2019, my half sister joined Ancestry.com, and my new wife had gotten me a subscription for it on our first Christmas in 2017, and hoping that Mom would be available. And sure enough, showed up January of 2019. And within a few weeks, I was talking on the phone with her. We had some video conversations. We spent a week with her in June, and it was amazing. And there was some habits of mine that Lubis saw with her immediately, and I did too. And we just laughed because it was obvious, right? Here's the genes, right? Because there was nothing nurturing about that because there was no contact.
Yeah.
And then February of this year, her cancer came back. She had 3 different types of cancer and had things removed over the years and was healthy when we met, happy as lark. But then I think that was the finishing touch of her bucket list. Yep. And the cancer came back and there was nothing that could be done.
Yeah.
But
how do you move through loss?
It's interesting because from my perspective, and even when I lost my adoptive father in 2012, I was numb and distraught and things, and yet I felt him come and hug me. And I've been a necromancer since I was a kid, didn't really know what it was initially, but I could talk to dead people. And so I have these conversations. And whether they're real or imagined doesn't really matter. I have the conversations. And so there's this, and knowing what I do with the quantum physics and things like that, there's a transfer of energy. There's a loss or a change of form, right? And in that change consciousness, because of my own NDE in college, I knew that there is no death because when I went into the light, I could still think. So I was conscious. And so those kinds of things really have an effect on your understanding of the availability of a greater reality, for lack of a better.
What happened with the NDE?
Well, I was in my first year of college. I was in a pre-med program, Ball State University, Dave Letterman's alma mater, and living in the honors dorm on the 4th floor, top floor. It's called Swinford Hall. It's not there anymore, from what I hear. And I was going through some emotional. I just came back from my first quarter break, and my girlfriend from high school, who had gone back to ask to marry me, was already married, and so my heart just kind of got ripped out. So I went back to school kind of empty, and I hit my knees and I prayed to know what truth was, and I was willing to die for it if necessary. Be careful what you ask for. The following Tuesday, and it's funny because it was 11/11/1975, and it was within, I think, 5 days of Travis' experience, and which I found kind of interesting years later. So I came back from class, and of course, being the mid-70s, I did the obligatory bong hit and album side meditation. And as I'm listening to Journey's first album, I'm laying across my dorm room bed. And second song is called In the Morning Day. And in between the vocals and the vamp, this voice I'd been familiar with since a kid called me by my given name, Bruce. Says, "Bruce, are you willing to die for what you believe in?" And I, shock. What do we believe in? Christ consciousness. Feels a little empty. Cosmic consciousness. That feels full. Yes. And at that same instant I said yes, Neil Sean does a guitar riff. Sounds like a rocket ship taking off. And I get a tug from my solar plexus and I'm out of body. And I'd had plenty of out of body experiences before, so I wasn't spooked by it. I turned to look at my body laying across my dorm room bed and turned back to look where I was going. And before I could get completely turned around, I was engulfed by white light. And it had this iridescent, effervescent, really high pitch sensation to it, because it was more than just hearing and feeling, right?
Sure.
And as I went into it, I was thinking about how this experience was happening, and in the light, I'm still thinking, oh, I'm aware that I'm thinking, so I can't be dead. And then it got boring, and I asked if there was more, and I went into I felt a movement, and I was in a kind of an indigo background with points of light around me, and I knew those points of light were points of consciousness, whether in body or not. I wasn't sure, because I wasn't, but I had the inkling that they were. And the voice picked back up at that point. And now this message has often been misinterpreted, so I'm going to preface it by, I'm not the one, right? But the voice says, these are those that you are to work with in order to facilitate a new world order. It will happen in your lifetime. Know this to be true. Your path will be full of trials and tribulations. Understatement.
Yeah.
Have faith and know that everything you need will be there at its appointed time. Trust and allow. And on the W and allow, I felt another rush of energy at this point, and I'm back in my body taking a gulp of air. And the first thing that I knew at that point was that we are all cosmic consciousness condensed into form. We're just not aware of it.
Aren't we all the one? Isn't the myth arc, the parables, all about that?
Yep. The I am, for lack of a better, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the most current or most ubiquitous of all of those phrasings. But yeah, we all have that direct connect, and we are all part of it. Now, we each have a different perfected form, fit, and function in the world, right? Because we're not all doing the same stuff.
No, that would be boring.
Exactly. So we have this diversity, which is why, there's this unity and diversity thing that was going on for a while, but it was still a cursory approach, because you don't realize the depth of what that really means, right? We're all cosmic consciousness connected, right? So if we're all that way, then we are literally all one. We just don't behave that way because we still are in these insignificant, often feeling inadequate kind of states of being, because we don't give in to that. We don't acquiesce to that knowledge and understand, let alone live it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's tough. It's a real challenge to be in that place, because you need partners, right? For one person to do that, it's almost, I can't say it's impossible.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge.
When you heard the voice, that call and response, what was the next step? What happened after that? After the hey you.
As a kid, I spun around and asked Mom if she could hear the voice. That was it. She couldn't, so I knew that there was something going on beyond normal hearing, even at that age. Maybe was an advanced soul coming into the earth and had that kind of awareness to begin with, because I seem to have always known and felt connected much more than anybody I knew around me. Mm-hmm. I've been that way all my life, and it's gotten progressively better to where Luba and I are actually learning how to live in quantum entanglement. And
okay, we'll have to cover that on the other side of the next break.
Okay.
But
was that same as living in spirit?
Yeah. Okay. So when you had that moment, was that like a unlocking of a door? Like you mentioned your necromancy and other intuitive abilities. Was it from that moment on that you changed?
I don't know that I ever changed, Alan. I keep, and trust me, I have really dug deep and looked for moments in my life where I felt like there was this dramatic shift in my consciousness. And honestly, there's been small shifts, but nothing huge, with the exception of the NDE I had in college. Okay. And I was really I mean, I came back from that thinking, okay, how and what do I need to do to prepare? And speaking of the New World Order. Now, the New World Order that I knew from that meaning was one of harmony among people and planet, right? That's the natural state of being in creation when you get through all the, I'll use this term, mishigas, right? You get through all the craziness and you align with that direct connect, and you begin to experience a more of a multidimensional lifestyle or life experience. And that indicators of that are synchronicities and serendipitous moments and images. You know, images can flash whether you have your eyes open or closed, right? They can flash in your mind. So those kinds of things are, I think, representative of being in touch that way.
So what you're talking about is not something that a political organization, institution, ideology
Not at all
can impart. Okay.
No, it's like they stole it from me, damn it.
Who?
You know, whoever it was that started, because that was in 1975, all right? I had not heard the phrase the New World Order until the maybe mid 80s. And then it was used with 1,000 points of light and the bushes and all of that kind of stuff. And I was like, gosh, you know, if they really, and maybe that's still, to me, this is my weird thinking, maybe that's just a way to kind of begin the movement towards that, because there's going to be pushback, and then there's going to be further investigation, right, by people that are wondering about this, and they're going to start looking at it from different angles. And, you know, that's just one angle. So if you start expanding your perception as to, okay, what else might be going on here that they're using terms for, that, you know, because government uses real terms sometimes in order to cover the truth up. They'll use the same term, but obfuscate the truth, as opposed to being straightforward with what it really means. And you know, for instance, and this isn't a government thing, but what do you think when I say the word apocalypse?
Yeah, I think the assumption is the end of the world.
Right. Some catastrophic event. But you know what it really means? Uncovering.
Yes. I was going to say
the of knowledge.
Right, like the apocryphal Gospels.
Right. So, you know, we get confused. Howard Bloom wrote a great book called The Lucifer Principle. And what he did was a scientific study of history and how small groups of people manipulated the masses by media control. Right.
Surprise.
Right, exactly. So, you know, the lies repeated over and over and over again eventually become truth.
But how do you know the difference when something is the truth repeated over and over again?
Okay,
versus
so this goes
into,
we call it the gut feeling, intuition. You know, the indigenous tradition, ancient tradition, was a 3-brain system, and that's the gut, the heart, and the head, and process information in that way. Now, quantum physics and modern medicine has shown that all things are energy. And medicine has shown that in the gut are neuroreceptors as well as the heart. So there are these additional sensory, you know, we have a holistic system, and that's not it. You know, you've got the gut, the heart, and the head. You've got the chakras. You've got the meridians.
Well, you know, let's hold it there, Zen. We'll talk about this whole system and the 3 hearts on the other side of this first break. I'm with Zen Benefiel, and you're listening and watching Paranormal Now on KGRA DB. This is Alan B. Smith. We will be right back.
members, the new KGRA-DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA-DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA-DB.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith, your grateful host, coming to you live on KGRADB.com, as well as on YouTube and Facebook. As a friendly reminder, in the last 30 minutes, we will open up the KGRADB hotline, and that is 1-855-472-5483 or 85-KGRA Live, and you can ask our guest your questions. And of course, now I have to tell you once again, because I'm totally excited about this, the Paranormal Now KGRADB promo code is PARANOW. So if you go to kgradb.com, sign up, enter PARANOW, and you get 30% off of a KGRA membership, which is the best in alternative talk radio and now video. Welcome back, Zen. I want to ask you quickly about how did you process your adoption? Because I have experience on my side of the family. I have a foster experience, adoption experience. Mm-hmm. What was it like to reconnect? And did you ever feel any resentment?
None. There was wonder. There was initial why, right? There were some deep emotional things that I went through in my own process of self-development where I deal with abandonment issues that were, I didn't really understand how deeply embedded those were. But you can imagine a kid at birth being taken away from their mother and not being connected, right? So there's going to be that sense of disconnection, which eventually evolves into a sense of abandonment, right? So, but that really, it didn't have much of an effect. I really didn't consider it. I had a great childhood. I had the freedom to do stuff. I was mischievous. I was a brainiac. And so I got in, I got into all kinds of stuff and was a great athlete as well. So I had all these things that my parents nurtured me and supported me in. And Dad was a 32nd degree Mason. Mom was a teacher, an English and Lit teacher in junior high. Dad was also a tool and die maker. So I had this really intelligent, nurturing atmosphere and strong values and ethics. I eventually went into DMLA as a teenager. I was a master counselor at 15. So I had all of these things. And still, even with that, I hung out with the chief of police's kids.
Right. Well balanced. Yeah. Well, it sounds to me like gratitude is important then.
Oh, absolutely. And even when Mom and I met, I was so grateful just to have that reconnection, and she was too. She still had the more regrets, I think, than anything, because as a mother, I don't know that you ever get over giving up your child.
Yeah.
Right. There's always that regret. But once we met and she found out who I was, the things that I do, and the wonderful wife that I have, and she was just like, I'm so proud of you. Right. And I think it might have made my half sister and half brother a little jealous.
Yeah.
Too, because they
I can understand that. Yeah, there's that extra affection out there now that you have, right?
Yeah. And I anticipated that, because I've studied. I'm kind of a cognitive scientist of sorts, and I've really done a lot of psychological and even some psychiatrical examinations, and that helped. I had a psychologist or psychiatrist right after my NDE that I told my parents about it. Of course, I was blabbermouth, right? I wouldn't tell everybody because it was so cool, right? I just wanted to share what happened. And then after the third visit, he says to me, that you're not crazy. You've had a spiritual awakening, is what he called it. And he said, why so young? I'm not sure, because most people don't go through it till their mid-40s, if they ever do.
Mid-40s. I've never heard that before.
Well, consider empty nesting. Right? You're not
So
there, but when your kids grow up and they leave the house and now you're empty and you need something new, right? So now you can redirect your life to something that's more purposeful. Not that raising kids isn't purposeful, right?
But now your full attention isn't on that every day.
Correct.
Right.
So, and that's what made sense to me when I was in my mid-40s. I've got 2 great grandkids now.
Well, tell us about your background, because you keep mentioning science and the quantum physics and research. So what have you done to prepare and to write all these books?
Experienced a lot, and then did a lot of research to find out why and how. Right? Because I generally, my life has been full of experiences because I've asked questions. I've been fearless. I've dove in where angels fear to tread. Right? And because after that NDE, I was no longer afraid of dying, and I knew that in the internal worlds there was no death, so I could experience anything or anyone. Never felt threatened, and I've experienced multiple realms and multiple beings, and there's never been a one that has been malevolent. There's been some that have had such strong energy that if I had some fear in me, I probably would turn and run or do the fight or flight kind of response.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I didn't, even when in it was 91, I think it was, that I had an experience with a Drac that a friend of mine had a healing center, and they had he had shown up in front of their office, and she calls me on the phone immediately, thinking she just got the prompt to do so. So she followed it, and she explained to me that there was a tall gray just outside of her door. So that's what she saw. And she asked me to come over. Fortunately, I was not busy, so I jumped in the car, and it was about a 15-minute drive. And on the way over there, I'm questioning, hey, is this real or is this just bullshit? And as soon as I asked the question, I felt like I got a javelin stuck in my left hip. And it hurt so bad, I almost had to pull off the side of the road. And so I'm like, okay, I get it. Something's going on. And so I eventually get there, and she meets me at the door. She says, he's already in the healing room, laying on his table. Follow me. And so I walked in with her. They had a lobby and healing room. So as I walked through the healing room door, I blinked. And when I blinked, I saw this 9-foot Draconian in uniform on this massage table. And
in uniform.
Yeah, in uniform.
What is this uniform?
It looked almost the same color of the skin, kind of a golden brown, for lack of a better, slightly shimmering. at least, a reflective material of some kind.
Okay.
And, he had the short snout, but definitely, reptilian, what I would have, or what I'd heard, was being called Draconians. This is my first experience with them. And just closing my eyes and seeing it was enough validation for me that it was there, right? Because I don't.
Did you have a pinch yourself moment?
I had an "oh shit, what do I do" moment, right?
Fair enough. Yeah.
Right, because she called me there as though I was going to be able to help somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And through the process, and this is in my book too, she had already established telepathic communication with him. So I talked verbally with her because I didn't want to step outside of that realm for my own experience at that time, because I wanted to keep it more real, I guess. And and being in that place, you can imagine what that was like.
Feels surreal.
Yeah, very surreal. And so as I'm asking her, she's explaining to me that he and his crew, and there was had been assigned to me. And I'm like, what? And they'd been watching me for several years and had a shift in heart because of how they saw me interacting with people. And I don't know how else to explain it, but that's just what he said to her. And then at the time, I had met her through some friends of mine. I was doing a TV show at the time, and she and her partner, who was in Canada at the time, and this was in Phoenix. So they were doing etheric implant removal. And I was like, I'm not so sure about all that. And so I went to them just to check them out. They did their scans on me, didn't find anything, but saw an energy blockage in my right knee. And with my eyes closed and looking internally, I could see my left thigh was slightly, or my right thigh was slightly swollen. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, whether there's telepathic suggestion going on or all, I can't really say. This is just the experience. And so I'm trying to explain it as an observer and a participant.
Sure.
So after they did that, and they put their hands on my knee, and I, eyes closed, saw what looked like laser lights, laser lights coming out of their eyes and into the back of their hands on my knee. And the swelling in my knee, or my thigh, went down. I didn't feel any sensation at that time. But what I did do, I had my hands not clenched, but closed. And I opened my hands up and imagine just sending a bolt of energy down or up through their feet. And at the instant that I did that, they both stood up straight and then bent back over again. And I said, what just happened? First words that I had said to them. And both of them said, well, it felt like we were just taken up on board ship and then came back. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't share what I had done because I just didn't want to go there. So 3 weeks later is when I got the phone call to come over there. And so she's dealing with this Drac, and the Drac said they were watching me and decided that they were going to destroy this etheric implant facility. Don't know where it was. And so he was a commander of a 3-ship flotilla, and they got into a fight and destroyed the machine, and then came looking for me to first of all, for me to help heal him. And so in doing so, I sat at his head and I ran energy through my hands and had Mary Margaret Rose was her name. I had her stand at the foot of actually several feet out from the end of the massage table at his feet, and bring the energy and vent it into the planet. Now, that may sound strange to some of your audience, but in energy work, that's kind of a common practice. running
Mhm.
energy through people and doing that kind of work. So once that was done, I left and told her to call me, if she needed to. And a couple hours later, she called and said that she was able to see, I don't know how many, she thought it may have been 100 in the grounds back behind their healing center, which was bordering a high school football field.
You said 100. What?
Other Draconians, I guess, for lack of a better.
Can you explain what the Draconian is?
Well, they look kind of like a bipedal crocodile without the tail, right? Only their heads are a little wider and the snouts are somewhat shorter. The teeth aren't exposed, or at least his weren't. There may be other races that are, but this particular one wasn't, and he was a good 9 foot tall.
So can you explain the connection or the interplay between what you describe as the tall gray and the Draco?
And what I saw, she would have been scared out of her britches if she would have seen a Drac, because that was her mindset. She was under the impression that Dracs were negative beings, and there was a lot of information, a lot of people talking about that kind of mentality about them at the time. I was not there, right? Because I hadn't had a direct experience. I had no clue. I don't take other people's word unless I truly trust them. But when you hear all that kind of stuff, it's something didn't set right in my gut. So I just let it go. And then when I had this experience, he was in a diminished state during that process. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm laying in bed and I just kind of call out to him. He called himself Hurley. So I called out to Hurley and I said, dude, if you're out there, can you hear me? And could you come pay me a visit? And
I'm sorry, Zen, which one's Hurley?
That's the Draconian.
Okay.
That was the name that he gave us to use, for lack of a better. It just made the communication easier at that point. Okay. So as I'm laying in bed, I'm thinking about life and something I'd done out of integrity. And I was in this place of self-judgment. And then all of a sudden I get hit with this, like a freight train of energy. And right then is when I could have had the fight or flight instinct, but I knew better. And I just took a breath and I relaxed and I opened up to it. And then I heard him talking to me. He says, oh, here I am. You asked. And I said, dude, your energy is so strong. He said, exactly. That's just who we are. And so through conversations, they're not really emotional, right? They're just this strong intellectual, directed, mission-driven kind of energy, right? Okay. And no tolerance for emotions. And so that kind of energy, when it shows up and you're an emotional being, it's going to seem pretty frightening and be interpreted as negative because of that. And that's just natural, in my opinion.
So it's kind of like if you come across a grizzly bear, it's not malevolent, but to be scared because you don't know what's going to happen next.
Right, sort of. Right. But these guys, there really wasn't any reason to be scared, and that's not the only experience I had about the same time. Actually, I want to say maybe 3 months earlier, maybe 4. I was laying in bed and all of a sudden I came to on a steel gurney. And I normally sleep in the nude, but I had a t-shirt on for some reason. And had electrodes lining my sphincter that looked like they were attached to wires. And then I woke up laughing.
Wait, you woke up? In what state were you when you went to bed?
I was probably in they call it a hypnagogic state. So I was right in between wake and sleep, liminal space, right, is another term that's used for it. Kind of the bridge between worlds, or the segue between where you kind of experience both of them simultaneously. And so I wake up laughing, and I look up, and there's 3 tall grays that are plastered up against the wall. And I don't realize it at the time, but afterwards I realized, I woke up laughing. That energy is going to be stronger to them, because they're very subtle energy beings, right? They're very sensitive, and that just pushed them away. And I'm like, come on, guys, what do you think you're doing? And I'm pulling these electrodes out, and I get to the last one, and it feels like a sting of a pubic hair, right? And so then I open my eyes up again, and I'm back in bed. And I'm like, oh man, I had a perfect opportunity. I've been waiting for years to have this kind of conversation.
Sure.
I'd had orange cigar shaped cloud experiences from the time I was 8 to 10, and then found out 15 years later in Ruth Montgomery's book, Strangers Among Us, that was the most common contactee experience in the Midwest in the late 50s and early 60s. So,
and did you have the impulse at the moment to ask a question?
Which question?
Oh, any question. Did you, in that moment when you're there with you noticed the electrodes?
No, I was laughing, and I was just concerned about getting the electrodes out of my butt, right? And I had no interference from them. Again, they were, just watching me. And so at the end, I'm back in bed, open my eyes up, and then I close my eyes. I think, oh man, I want to go back, and I'm trying with everything that I can to go back, not knowing how.
Yeah.
Right. So I find myself in this indigo space, and this being shows up that he's male, and he's wearing this kind of a shimmering cloak. And it was kind of a mostly black, but it was shimmering. So it had that reflective quality too. And he says to me, next time, just relax. We're just trying to tune you up so we can communicate more easily.
What is tuning you up?
Well, the interesting thing was, I had spent the last week studying anatomy with my girlfriend at the time. She was training to be a massage therapist, and we were studying the nervous system. And the perineum, which runs out of the tip of the spine and ends in the sphincter and the genitals, directly connects into the central nervous system. So the science behind that then would be, if you're going to connect to a body in some way in order to adjust their vibratory rate, where would you do it?
I was thinking you could still do it through the brain, couldn't you? Like, is that the only way?
No, because
really?
that's not the central nervous system, right? You'd have to do.
Possibly. Well, I guess
I can't say that those kind of mechanisms, but this was virtually non-invasive. Now it seems invasive because we're taught that, sexual origins, genitals, don't talk about that. Don't talk about sex, So we have this proclivity to just, shove that kind of stuff aside. Or, for instance, oftentimes when they use that technology, the experiencers will have orgasms. And so they think it's a sexual experience or experiment.
Oh, that's an interesting. So, because all those experiencers who say, and particularly Whitley Strieber, who's had somewhat akin experiences,
right?
It may not have actually been like a sexual encounter, but the attempt to tune them up, as it were.
So, and think about this. So, subtle energy beings, we all are. What's the operation of the universe? Subtle energy, right? So these thin worlds that are beyond the physical, because this is the most condensed space that there is, right? Where the vibrating strings assemble closer. Because why? Because the vibratory rate's lower, right? Light and sound condensing into what appears to be form, but there's still 99% space.
Sure.
Right? What's in the space? Consciousness. So in that place, then the subtle adjustment allows you to be more perceptive.
How far, I wonder, can one be tuned up then? I mean, is it not something, if there's an impetus here to help individuals or human race evolve, is there not more an expeditious way of doing that?
On an individual basis, there are those that have advanced enough consciousness, have experienced enough lifetimes, right, to where they are ready for that. It's like they're primed.
Okay.
And all they need is a little bump, right, to get them to that next level. Now, that's not everybody, but it doesn't take everybody. All it takes is one or even a few to pierce the veil of another level and begin interacting with it to make it available for others.
Okay, well, we are primed to go to the second break, and we will pierce the veil and come back on the other side with Zen Benefiel. And I promise we will talk about Stubbing My Toe on Purpose, his new work.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and we'll talk about more about spirituality. But again, it's so funny how all of this gets intertwined. I find it absolutely fascinating. And that's
the thing, before we get to break, everything has to fit or none of it matters.
Sure. It's like a 5-dimensional tetrahedron puzzle of some sort. And that's why it's so difficult, I think, for us to navigate this. And we seek these answers and ask these questions for millennia. And though some tease that they have gotten there, that they get it, it hasn't been enough, really, for all of us, for the entire human race to evolve. So I don't know. Maybe we'll learn more about that on the other side with Zen. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRADB.com. I will see you all on the inverted upside down.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on air live button. So just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our tonight's guest is Zen Benefiel, and we will be talking about his book, Stubbing My Toe, Big Toe on Purpose. So Zen, thank you so much for joining tonight. This is a really exciting time for KGRA because, we're transitioning into a membership forum, and it'll be a forum where people can access fascinating topics like this, because on Paranormal Now, we keep the door pretty wide open. So, and you have a wide girth of
I'm pretty wide open. Yeah,
that you cover. Absolutely. And, I think sometimes people wonder, it's one thing to say, hey, I saw a UFO or I had an abduction experience. But when you have a multitude of, life-changing experiences that are, kind of bizarre, does that hurt your credibility? Is it better to say I had one or two rather than say I had five?
Well, it depends on how big a mouth you have and how you articulate, I think. And it took me years to learn to articulate in ways that didn't sound like I was, because it's easy to get really excited. And you can tell I get amped up sometimes talking about this because it's exciting stuff. Well, sure. You can do that and you sound almost manic to some people. And so they wonder. So you don't want to do that. And then, it can. I was interviewed for a metaphysical coming together, which was the name of the event, when I was working for an aerospace company. I was a production control coordinator. I was in charge of $7 million in shipments a month in my late 20s.
Logistics.
And so I've got a kind of a interesting background in that respect. And after the interview, I had some of the folks at work who listened in, and I was unaware, and they treated me a little different. There was some cajoling and remarks and stuff like that, and I kind of I'm used to it. However, I also decided, in order for me to really have the credibility, then I need to have credibility. So I got an MBA in project management. Then I got a teaching cert, taught high school for several years. And then at the end of that stint, I got an MA in organizational management. And then I graduated in 2003. And then in 2004, I started doing partnering workshops for building road and bridge construction projects, which are multi-million dollar projects that I lead a team building process in. And I go all over the country to do that. I've actually got one next week in Fargo, North Dakota for $68 million 4-mile raising I-29 above the floodplain project. So,
are you concerned about your work life intersecting with, your paranormal?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Early on, I was a little concerned, but I thought, it is what it is. And if I'm going to be living in any fear whatsoever, then it's not going to work, because I'm going to produce whatever it is I'm fearful of. That I do know.
Tell us about stubbing my big toe.
Well, it's actually stubbing my toe.
Oh, stubbing my toe. I keep thinking big toe because that's the one I stub all the time.
That's Tom Campbell's stuff. My big toe.
Oh, okay.
Right. Tom Campbell is a physicist. He worked with Bob Monroe and helped develop the binaural and hemisync tapes and all that kind of stuff for out-of-body journeys. And Tom talks about, and this is where my wife and I connected initially. She was really into Tom Campbell at the time, watching a lot of his lectures and stuff. And so the original version was called Zendor the Contrarian, and with the same subheading.
That was for the same book.
Yeah, it's same title. It's not on the background there because I've taken it off. But stubbing my toe, theory of everything on purpose, kind of a double entendre where I'm purposely stubbing my toe because I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm putting the truth to the test. I'm whacking away at everything that I experience till I get to the bare bones of it and understand the hows and the whys. And then the other side of that is I'm after understanding my perfected form, fit, and function, which is my purpose in life. Okay. And that I was given as a teenager at 18 is kind of a rite of passage. I'm here to help facilitate the New World Order, right? So how that takes place, actually, I thought I was going to have to live to be 150 the way things were going until COVID hit. And now we have, as my good friend Swami Beyondananda calls it, the Great Reset.
It's very optimistic, and I'd love to believe that. It
depends on us.
There's always some tragedy. I mean, there was the Black Plague, the Spanish flu. There was 9/11. Now, whether that was planned or not, I know people have different opinions on that. But the point is that there's always some unexpected tragedy that happens, and sometimes, yes, it does. World War I created the League of Nations. World War II. After that, the American economy took off in manufacturing and the highway system. Like, so many positives came out of it, but I wouldn't quite say it was like a metaphysical transformation.
We're coming out of it now with the advent of regenerative cultures development, and sense making is a term that's being used now.
Sense making?
Yes.
Okay.
Otto Scharmer, instructor, professor at MIT, he and Peter Senge put a series of classes together called Transforming Business, Society, and Self. This was several years ago. I joined part of that, or I joined that. And there were 32,000 students around the globe. It was an online series of classes that were interested in transforming business, society, and self. So that's just, just people that had access to that found out about it and joined in.
Yeah.
Now, in 2019, there's a group called the Global Regenerative Collab that is all virtual. And these guys are from all over the world, and they have highly defined skill sets. And these are people that came out of the corporate world that said, not working. We need to figure something else.
Oh, what's not working?
The corporate structure as it is, the profit over people and planet agenda. And so now we're working on changing that agenda to people and planet over profit. Doesn't do away with profit, because we still got to live, right? It just shifts the attention and awareness of how that business is done.
Yeah, philosophically, I agree. But for many, that sounds dangerously close to something like communism or socialism.
So if you're doing the right things and you're helping people and you're working towards common goals, what does it matter what you call it? This is where we get stuck on labels and categories and titles. And this is indicative of the human race and the left brain minds.
Right. Well, that is the problem, is that people get stuck on certain ideas of a definition.
Let's go into the right brain and say, okay, let's play around a little bit. What Scharmer uses is called the theory. It's called Theory U, and it's basically a process of learning where your blocks are, releasing them, learning how to co-presence and co-sense. And this is as groups, right? And these not just organizations or study groups or anything like. These are organization work groups around the world that are using this process. And then they work to developing what they call prototyping, right? Which comes through the process of sense making and talking about the various things in open, vulnerable, communicative ways, so that no stone is left unturned. Everybody's heard, all the concerns are raised, and y'all work through them together. Right.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. All voices should be heard.
These tools are being used in business. I was part of a thought leaders in systems transformation series recently that had people like Dave Snowden, Nora Bateson, Nancy Kakar, Michelle Holliday, Anthony Upward. And these are all people who are in the field working with these concepts. And Michelle came out, for instance, she came out of Coca-Cola and Heinz. She worked for them as a branding expert for years. And now she's working with groups of people and organizations to transform how they do business and how they treat each other. Because it has to do, that's where it starts, right? It's that, first of all, I got to love myself. Then I can love others. Now, how do you demonstrate that? You learn how to get along. You let all of those things that are divisive, that are separative, that are blockages to progress, you just let them go.
So you're saying greed isn't good?
Absolutely not. Why would it be? Because it is selfish and it is to the detriment of all others, right? This is where, like when I was working for Allied, in the aerospace industry, many contracts were military. And so the organizational culture, the corporate culture was, if you don't get me what I want, I'm going to go to your boss and I'm going to beat you up and him up and whoever else needs to be beat up in order to get what I want. Right? So it's highly adversarial. Partnering was the same way. When Arizona instituted partnering workshop or partnering, there were $19 million in litigation fees for the state the previous year. First year of partnering, it went down to $1 million. And and the principles of partnering are commitment, communication, integrity, and trust. So how do you build that? Right. And that's what's happening coming out of COVID. In the Great Reset, COVID-19, the Great Reset that Klaus Schwab wrote, along with something theory, I can't remember his first name, or maybe theory was his first name. So he asked two questions. First, can we be caring and compassionate coming out of COVID to each other? And the second, regarding business, can we be agile enough? Right? And we be flexible to do the right thing in order to move forward? Because if we constantly go back to the old patterns of doing business, we're going to fail because they don't work. Right. So now
what was the word that you use? We
set.
So
the Great Reset. It's the Great We Set.
The Great Reset. I hear what you're saying. But that seems contrary to some degree of like the typical articles that we read about how people are working from home. They're in that sense more isolated from their coworkers.
Yes and no. Reason being that in that opportunity of working from home, you no longer are bound to living in a certain place, right? So the regenerative culture, I was part of a group, the festival in May that was about building regenerative communities. And what those are kind of natured co-working, co-living spaces that these people that are now remote workers and know that they don't have to go into a building anymore, they're choosing where they live. And so they're redesigning their lifestyles accordingly. Now, this all takes time. You know, Jose Arguelles and I had a conversation back in the 90s about the transition from the Piscean to the Aquarian age and what that was going to be like. And of course, he was the one that brought out the harmonic convergence, right? And so during that time, then there's this 25-year window up to the apex, which was the winter solstice of 2012. And the rise in awareness and consciousness paralleled the information curve at that time. So what happens when you reach the tipping point and you fall over the next side? Well, by the time you've got that awareness and consciousness embedded in you, don't you think that's going to change how you live and work and entertain relationships? So you're going to take that back into the existing systems that you work in, and they too will gradually be transformed. But now, the initial side of that, though, those things that don't resonate with that are all going to come to the surface for everybody to be aware of.
Right. That makes sense. But isn't it still on the onus of, I don't know, the owner of the company or someone to help bring social gatherings together? So let's say, all these people are working by themselves at home. Yeah, they're Zooming in and that sort of thing. But my experience was I prefer the work from home model, but I know that I need social contact and interaction. And I think it's healthy to, on occasion, meet up with the other staff members and hang out socially or work in the office on occasion.
And those hybrid organizations will evolve as well, where they need to. There may be some that don't, right? This is all, we're in this state of malleability where we're making choices, we're looking at what can be done, we're learning new methods of communication. People are getting better at what they do, of utilizing their time. And I was talking to Mitchell Levy, who's he's like a credibility guru kind of guy. And he's been doing a lot of research on how things have been affect productivity through COVID. First 6 months of sequestration, productivity actually went up. Then it leveled off. And now it's starting to go back down again because the novelty has worn off, right?
Sure.
So these are all natural. As a cognitive scientist, we look for patterns and processes and their repeatability and what kind of effects they have on the individual, the collective, and the environment. Right. This is a holistic picture back to Rebuild, the festival that I participated in, I gave a presentation on a holistic educational village. It includes body, mind, spirit, and earth connections. That's one we've been missing in our educational system. We've even been missing the body, mind, spirit, right? Montessori and Waldorf schools kind of go that direction, but public education won't touch it.
Yeah. Well, there's something to say about earth connection. I mean, when you're walking in the city, if you're walking down a street and it's filled with trees, compare that to a street that has one tree every 500 yards or so, you can feel the difference.
Absolutely.
Your energy seems to kind of just drop down and calm down a little bit.
Now, here's the difference in that. One who is aware and honors that, embraces it, even has reverence for it, right, is going to have a much different experience than somebody that's basically a deadhead and just notices that there's more trees. Like, oh, that's cool.
Well, yeah, that's interesting you brought that up, because I've always thought about, there are some people out there who, they live near nature, right? Or maybe even in nature to a degree. And there seems to be a lack of appreciation for it, like the lack of a deeper connection to it. And I've always wondered about that, because I'm of that mindset, having lived in a city for so long, that, gosh, if people in the city knew what it was like, to grow up near the beach, or to grow up, in the mountains, or, to go out on hikes and climb trees. But, it doesn't have the same spiritual effect on everyone.
No, but it does have some, right? It may not be, you may not put labels on it, but there's a difference in how you feel, right? And you can ask people and they will explain that it just feels more open. When I taught high school, I taught at inner city high schools and charter schools. Most of these kids never got out of the valley. And by the valley, I mean the Phoenix Metro Valley. And so, we've got the Grand Canyon to the north. We've got the Pines. There's just all kinds of really cool places to go. And they've never had that experience. So their life experience is kind of truncated, right? And so there's other things that has to take place in the classroom in order to kind of open up those kinds of things. And usually that's just, experimentation with conversations, maybe doing some guided imagery processes. Can't call it meditation. Right?
Why can't you call it meditation?
Well, in most schools, they're very Christian based, and meditation has been looked upon as something not Christian for a long time. And so at that level.
I totally understand what you're saying. And I always found that funny, because
me too.
If you do the research on how, let's say you go back to old,
well, wait a minute, but Alan, these are people that don't do research. They're superstitious. Well,
also one's institution may not, pass on information that they studied at seminary school or what have you. And the prayer, if you go way back in time, what prayer is described of even by the Catholic Church is a much more meditative process. Absolutely. It's not just go quick, boom, put your question out there and then you're done. I mean, that's healthy too, but it is much more about, it's much more about mindfulness.
Yes.
And connecting. Sure.
Right. Now, those kinds of things have not been part of the educational system. They just haven't. Australia was the first one to institute holistic education, and that was in the mid 80s. Howard Gardner's work at Harvard with the multiple intelligences and pulling those into the educational process and actually creating lesson plans that include them, that still hasn't been instituted ubiquitously through high school systems, let alone college.
Right. So what is...
And that was in 82.
What is stubbing the toe? What is that exactly?
Well, stubbing my toe is my way of honoring Tom Campbell, for one, and of stating that I'm willing to be vulnerable and fall my way through and experiment and question and take whatever, as I was told back in college, my life would be full of trials and tribulations. So if it's going to be, then by God, I'm going to be a bear, I'm going to be a grizzly, right? So why not? And that makes life pretty rough sometimes. At the same time, because of my background and experience, I know to trust it. I know the faith, love, and trust are the three principles that I live by. And then I follow that up with my attention, intention, and interaction in the direction that magnifies those.
Okay. All right. So everyone stand by. In 10 minutes, we're going to open up the KGRA DB phone lines. And that number is 855-472-5483 or 85-KGRA. Live call in. Bill Skywatcher, our producer, will be there to bring you on the air. And you can ask Zen your question or share your story. And of course, the now new Paranormal Now access code to become a KGRA DB member is Para Now. So when you sign up for your membership for 30% off, enter Para Now, PRANAW 21. Para Now 21. Whoops.
That's a great promo screen, Bill. So I know Bill's listening.
So and you'll get shows just like this with Zen in the future, and all the archives are going to be there. So Zen, for so many people though, we like these ideas, right? But there's those personal stumbling blocks, whether it's self-confidence, or insecurity, depression, drug and alcohol abuse, whatever it is. It's like it's kind of hard to get to those higher precepts of what our potentials are.
Is it? That's a belief system, Alan.
But don't you have to get over that hurdle first, though?
You have to let go of it being there. And because that's where your attention's at, is on the hurdle, right? From what you just said, that's where your attention was at. So if you could at least suspend your belief system for a little bit and imagine that hurdle wasn't there, what would life be like? What would you do, right? Now, as a transformational life coach, which is another certification I picked up, and I've been doing that for almost 20 years now. And the process of what I do with my clients is exactly that. We have a conversation. I do a survey. We have a conversation. Afterwards, we look at the language that they use, how they think, and adjust accordingly. Because as you talk about what you believe life to be, you reveal where those stumbling blocks are. And having gone through all of that myself and knowing intimately what those are and my ability to hear them and recognize them when they come out, then I can say, hey, okay, I realize you just said that, but is that really what you meant? Or, what if you changed that statement to a different statement in your head so that you can produce another result instead, right? And so, for example, a very concrete way, I took a chiropractor, been in business for 20 years, increased his net revenue by almost 50% in 90 days because I shifted how he thought about things, which enabled him to do what it changed his being, first of all, right? Because be, do, have. It's not do, be, have. So it changed his being into one that is more receptive, more aware, paying attention to synchronicities, serendipitous moments, all that kind of stuff. And it just deepens the awareness you have of what your own process is. And when you begin to monitor your own process, then you can really make progress. Right?
And what are you doing to monitor? I mean, because the mind is very tricky.
Yeah, it's a discipline. You have to become aware of how you think and feel and choose.
Well, what do you do? Do you go for jogs, meditate? What's your plan, that like a general plan that most people can follow?
Well, first of all, in meditation, the first thing you have to do is learn how to watch your thoughts. Right? One of the techniques I use is putting your fingertips together and feeling your heartbeat in them. Once you feel your heartbeat in your fingertips, you are out of your mind,
Interesting.
right? Because you're
It's
feeling at that point.
it's like a walking meditation.
Absolutely. You can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? Board meetings, in front of an audience, wherever. When you practice it and you just have, after you practice it enough times, it becomes that you don't even need to do that. It's just you pause.
Yeah.
Right? And when you pause, therein is that vulnerability for whatever needs to come up to bubble up from within you. Because we, again, back to that direct connect, right? We're not disconnected. We're that point of light that bounces back and forth over lifetimes between the Earth and whatever other planet and the great light.
Yeah.
Right. So over time, then once you establish that, that contact is real and you experience it, you have some validation, you have some tests, and you begin to notice those synchronicities, and then you follow them, or the signs where, you're just, it's interesting how sometimes your eyes will just naturally be directed towards something. You won't even be thinking about it. Just all of a sudden you look over and there's somebody that's looking at you. Right. So what do? You usually just, and walk away. Right. So what happens if the eyes are truly the gateway to the soul, as many believe, and that connection was just made? Why do you think it happened? And why wouldn't you go investigate further?
Fear, because you don't know who that person is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then get over it. Humble yourself. Be a little daring. Right.
What do you mean? Because there are moments where those things happen.
Absolutely.
You must be feeling something in particular in that moment, because there are also moments where you can make eye contact with someone who has not good intentions too. Like, are you feeling something within you that
most of the time those instantaneous, spontaneous connections aren't malevolent. They can't be.
Yeah.
Now,
so it's like when you make
a relationship and you get that, that malevolent look. Yeah, you do get that sometimes.
So is it a feeling like when you make eye contact with someone at a social event, let's say, and there's just a feeling like,
it can be really cool. It can be really engaging. It can be inspirational, and it could just be, I recognize, that there's a connection there, and then you follow up on it. It depends on the individual, because we all have different sensory arrays and we all perceive reality differently. And it's like, Jim Britt. I was having a conversation with him the other day, and he had a conversation with the Dalai Lama, and he asked him, what's the best religion, or what about all the religions? Or I forget the exact question, but the Dalai Lama's response was, if every person in the world had their own religion, that would be good. Because you know what religion means? It means reunion with God. Right? So that's an individual.
Well, we are seeing more of that. We're seeing more people who call themselves spiritual, or, metaphysical, or agnostic, whatever term that they use, or New Age, and they're taking, like myself, bits and pieces of other systems and creating something that works for you to help, that person get, connected.
Just don't get stuck in identity, right? Because I see a lot of people get caught up in the ego and forget about the we go.
So here you go with the we again. So where does this take us? Where does this take us now? So we're hopefully coming out of the pandemic.
We're on the way to type 1 civilization, right?
I would hope so.
Okay. And a type 1 civilization, from the Kardashev scale, just so we're on the same page, and your audience is as well, is where a planet, people on the planet utilize the planet's energy, wind, solar, water, all of that. We manage the weather systems. We have all this energy and weather and things that is in harmony, right? And there's no push and pull to get it. It's just there. Type 2 is solar system orientation, or type 3 is galactic. So as a type 1, we're at about a 0.1 right now because we do have some solar, wind, and water power, right? But we're still relying on fossil fuels. Well, we've gradually got to wean ourselves off. And this is not ever going to happen overnight. And people need to have patience, perseverance, persistence, passion, and purpose in all of this. They call that the 5 Ps, right? There's a 6th there, and that's practice. So when
probably the most essential.
Yeah, exactly. And like the 6th sense, right? So in this process, then we are moving gradually, could be, at a snail's pace. And as one thinks, I wanted to say something. There's another guy with the B. Smith, only his first name's Wilbert. And you're probably familiar with him. He was the director of Project Magnet for Canada. It was Canada's UFO investigation in the 1950s, funded by the Department of Transportation. So he had conversations with what he called people from elsewhere. One of the things that they told him was our concept for time is all out of whack. Time to them is a measurement of the change of entropy. So imagine with that statement then, or assumption, right? Let's do a hypothesis.
Assumption. Sure.
Right. So we're going to have a hypothesis here. If that's true, then the more connected we get, the better we work with each other. Time is going to seem to be truncated because we're not going to need so much because the entropy is not there.
Now, you think that it'll really affect us that directly?
Oh, absolutely. The natural systems never go into decay. Right. And the premise of entropy is that systems naturally go into decay, right? One of the other things that the people from elsewhere told you, your cousin, was that in this process, that if we see anomalies in the universe, then we don't understand the universe well enough yet. Now, this is coming from
I can understand that, yeah.
Right?
But I mean, we're talking about that's going to be a long time before we understand.
I don't know, right? Because look at how far we've come in the last 25, 30 years. Compare that to, a lifetime of my parents, right? 90 years or the last century. Look at how much progress we have made. Now, we haven't had all the intelligence on board yet because we didn't really think about the effects of what things might have. Like even the chemtrails, they're originally to help protect us from cosmic rays, and they release these particles in the ionosphere, I think it is, and then they energize them with the HARP antenna to create this barrier. Well, the unintended consequences of whatever, the filaments and things affecting people's health, they didn't really think about that. And they really didn't have time to test it because it was so necessary to get the stuff to work, right? So that they could protect us.
Or so they thought.
Yeah. Well, we often think, how fast does negative information travel? Right? You hear nine negative things before you hear one positive thing. So that's kind of how we work. And so we're going to poke the holes. We're going to project all kinds of stuff. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Instead of look for that golden kernel that's really at the core of it.
All right, Zen.
People really don't have bad intentions. Some
overall, I think, by and large, for sure. All right, so we're going to bring Ron from Minnesota. You're live on the air with Zen Benefiel. Welcome, Ron.
You pronounced it right, finally.
Well, how you doing?
Hey, Ron. Do you have a question for Zen Benefiel?
Yeah. Hi, Zen. How you doing? Good show tonight. And hello to the chat. Last time I forgot to say that. But anyway, I've noticed in my own personal life, I've noticed a connection with everyone living, but also with other situations from another angle, I guess I could say it.
Good enough.
And I'm not really sure how to explain it. But I've become more aware of and accepting certain ideas, which in my younger days I might not have been so accepting of them. Okay, and I think that's, in my opinion, I think it's an improvement. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think that, if you experience something over and over and over again, you kind of got to acquiesce to the reality that it's real.
Yes.
No matter what you want to think. So how do you get comfortable with that? That's kind of an individual question, right? Because I don't really know exactly what your experience is. If you're having it, though, it allows you that openness to just explore it and be okay with it. Ask it questions.
Interesting. I like that.
That makes sense.
And and I like that that viewpoint, because then you're allowing your mind to be open to other opportunities, as I might put it.
Right.
And it's a process, and it's a way so that we can build on our consciousness as we go to the next level. As you think, I don't think we die necessarily. Our life here ends, our physical life ends, but our spiritual life, or our energy part, goes on forever, wherever that may be. Now the Bible tells us, a couple different stories. I once was, a firm believer in everything the Bible said about heaven and hell and everything else, but then after I got to looking at it, there's a lot more to it than what that's really telling us. And what we need to understand is that there's more to reality told. So just open the mind up and accept it and realize that. And as we grow, then we are ready for the next level.
Indeed, Horatio.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Have a good night.
All right, thank you, Alan.
So, Ron, again, just flow with it, be comfortable, and you're right. There are many opportunities to do so. Now, I also might suggest there's a video from a Russian academic named Mironova, and you can look that up in YouTube. Look up Mironova, that's Mironova, and global mutation.
Interesting. Okay.
It is in Russian. It's a dissertation of scientific study.
Okay.
But there's English subtitles.
Okay. And what's the assertion there?
Well, there's recent scientific studies that actually demonstrate that the ascension that we've been talking about is, or not we, but the global we, is real, that we can reach a place where we can take our bodies with us.
So there's physiological indicators of that, or?
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So we're going to take our second call tonight. Charles from Ohio. Welcome to Paranormal Now. You're on the air with Zen.
Hello, Alan. Hello, Zen. Glad to meet you.
Pleasure.
This has been a very, very enlightening program. I've been
thanks, Charles.
Learning more about this in the last 5 years. I've been a student of it for the last, my life. But it feels like things are coming together to a point where they're reasonably understandable. I do feel there's a great awakening. We're on the doorstep of a great awakening. And I'm curious about what we can do to help that happen.
Be your best.
I'm looking at sharing more. Sharing our experiences, sharing our fears, sharing our hopes. I think there's a lot more of that happening now that we have communications with people all over the world. I think that's an important part of bringing this better world into existence.
That's the point. If you share, then you actually help bring people together.
Absolutely. And if it's your impetus to share. Not everybody has that. I made a post the other day to encourage those, especially in this transition of taking the UFOs and UAPs out of just the sightings and actually getting more engaged with the reality of what's behind it all, and encouraging experiencers to share their stories. And then I have this picture of my books and myself in it, just as encouragement for people to begin sharing, because that's the only way that we're going to do it, is talk about it, make sense with it.
Mm-hmm. All right, Charles, do you have another question?
Just one more point, I guess.
Sure.
The thing is, I think the sharing part of it comes from our outlook, that we walk into this, that we interact with this world with. If we walk into it with a feeling of scarcity, then we can't share. We hold on to those things that matter to us. But if we walk out into the world and look at it as a place of abundance, it's easy. And I think it's an important thing that I've come to understand.
Precisely. And it's the state of mind. It's where your attention, your intention, and your interactions are directed.
All right. Thank you so much, Charles, for the call.
Yeah, that's awesome, Charles. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, brother. All right. So I do want to pick this up. So
sure.
It's August 2021.
Lionsgate even.
And we are actually entering the Aquarius age. This isn't 1969 dawning of the Aquarius. This is the age of Aquarius that we're actually entering.
Oh, come on, Bill.
So how does that make a difference? Because before the boomer generation was getting us prepared. And then now you have younger generations who are going, okay, what next?
The difference is science and spirituality are proving each other to be the same, right? Quantum physics is proving what the ancient sages were saying about life and how the law of attraction even, right? Mm-hmm. So all of these things are lining up with, like Charles was saying, with a different understanding and an invitation to engage. So
you said be our best, and then you also said, but not everyone can share, right? And so do what you can. So
yeah, a lot of people are still reticent, or some people just don't feel the need to share, right? But if you have the impetus or you want to, then by gosh, step up and share, whether it's video, whether it's writing, whatever it is. I've been doing it for years. Trust me, there's not going to be anyone that's going to come chasing you down with a gun, right? Or put you away now. Back in the 70s, different story.
Right? Put you away because of what you say. I
did, and I was.
Yeah. It reminds me of Terrence
experience too, and I got through it, and I learned from it, and I moved on, and I realized, hey, I really the psychiatrist I saw to begin with, and his admonition to not talk about it to anybody because they're not going to understand me. As you can tell, I'm kind of a blabbermouth, so I talked about it, and it wasn't necessarily, and I talked about it in the wrong environment. And I had a conversation with my adoptive father a couple of years before he died, and for decades, I just wanted to have this deep spiritual conversation with him, and time, he denied me of it. And he finally said, I understand you. I said, really? Well, you sure don't act like it. He says, my greatest fear was that you would open your mouth up in the wrong place and they would put you away. And I said, Dad, I've been in Phoenix for 35 years. I'm still free. I think I made it.
Right.
But I understand.
you still have to be careful these days. I mean, someone says the wrong thing, and someone can be picked up on the street and locked up.
Well,
Right?
this is where you listen and you pay attention to when you're prompted to speak. I think that's the third insight in the Celestine prophecy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Miguel Ruiz, yeah.
Right. So there's that.
Oh no, that was James. That was James.
James
Who wrote
Redfield.
James Redfield? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the Four Agreements.
Yeah. That's another. But these, when you're in that place, and this is part of the discipline, right? Because it is a discipline. There's no two ways about it. You have to monitor what you're thinking, how you're feeling, make sure that you're in that caring space, right? And if you're being aggressed, you know that person needs something, right? So don't aggress back. Just be in that quiet space, put the pause button on, and ask them what they need and be helpful. And you'd be surprised how that shifts, even a grocery store, any environment where you go into. Now, there are going to be in some places that you're probably not going to get that kind of response if you're in a bar and you're dealing with somebody that's drunk. Well, don't be in a bar with drunk people.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, that's just a simple choice.
Well, what are we supposed to do then with the situation we're in right now? Because are you kind of saying that the pandemic is a positive turn for us? Because there were a lot of lives lost too, and the financial fallout.
Unfortunately, and there's
jobs lost
too.
Yeah, suicides.
So what happens in most catastrophes? Something ascends from it better than things were before in everything. And as we understand, the loss of life is only temporary. It's just a change of form, right? Yes, it's devastating. Why? Because we're attached. If you're not attached, that doesn't mean you can't love. Just the opposite. You actually love more deeply when you're not attached, right? Because that's conditional love.
Attachment is conditional love.
Absolutely. Right?
So unconditional. I've always been a Bob Marley fan, and I honest to God, when you break things down and make it really simple, and just try to focus on love as the intention, then if that's the spearhead, then everything else that follows is, am I being kind enough? Am I, relaxed? Am I in a more harmonious state? But you have to kind of lead, in my opinion, with that. We have a call from Eric from Boston. You're on the air with Zen Benefiel.
All right.
Welcome, Eric.
Yeah, Zen. I really enjoy listening to you. You're brilliant, and changing the world by example. That's how we do it, and you're a very, very good example. I really like what you're saying.
Thank you. That's heartwarming.
I agree with everything I've heard you say, but the one thing I want to challenge you on is I don't believe in chemtrails. How do you conclude that there are chemtrails?
Good question, Eric.
Well, I look up and I see planes dispersing them over Phoenix. That's kind of the reality of it. And even the government has admitted that's what they do. I mean, you look at the geoengineering project from the early or late 70s, I think, when they started developing all this stuff, and they were doing it because they wanted to protect the Earth from cosmic rays.
Okay, I agree.
I mean, the facts are out there if you do your research.
Yeah, I agree that there may have been projects like that at one time, but I think what you learn about is what contrails are, what a contrail is, and what a chemtrail.
Different. The contrails don't last. Chemtrails do.
No, contrails can last. They become cloud and they last, and they are not chemtrails. They really aren't.
Well, I can't really speak anything more than what I know about that. And I've done the research. I looked at the science behind it and why they were doing it. And I understand the reasons. and I leave it at that.
Yeah,
The
no,
rest of it
I
is
understand.
conjecture, and I don't.
Yeah, contrails can last for quite a
They
while.
can, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I've heard of people trying to test the particulates in the air when there's been a spraying. I don't know if I've ever seen any solid evidence of that.
there was some from Oregon or Washington where they found some particles on the ground. It had strontium and barium and aluminum.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, how those things got there on the ground is another story. But I really, I was curious if you knew, you had seen chemicals being put on a plane or something. I wondered if it was something like that. No,
I have seen photos of the interior of aircraft that were designed to do so. Yes.
On your website.
I do kind of have a running joke. Bill knows this and all. I call it the chemtrail virus. People that think there's chemtrails, it's the chemtrail virus. And I'm a little bit serious about that, because to believe that they're doing that, and the people that believe that they're being harmed and made sick by that, that's actually, to me, sort of a dark, it's not a comfortable thing to hear that people believe. It's a negative. It's a sickness to me. And there are people that look up at them and actually feel like they're getting sick, and they're completely deluded.
Well, people can produce a lot of things in their body from how they believe, and that's been proven scientifically. So I would just prefer to acknowledge that, yeah, they're there. So what? We got more to do here with what's right in front of us, and we can't do anything about that. So at least I can't.
Eric, I do appreciate and skepticism is very healthy to have. Of course, I'm going to put a link in the comment section right now. You may be aware, Eric and Zen, that China has been working on weather manipulation programs.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sure. Absolutely.
Moving towards a type 1, we're going to have those kind of programs. That makes sense, right?
They may have those programs, but they are not the ones that you're seeing in the sky. Those are contrails, and you need to learn that those are contrails, not chemtrails.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your call. I appreciate it. We've got 2 minutes left of the show. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Eric. And thank you, Charles, for calling in. And thank you, Zen. Tell people a little bit about where they can get the book.
Well, they can get the book on Amazon. Just, type in Stubbing My Toe on Purpose. Or you can plug in my name and, pick from any of the other books as well. Kind of look into those and see what they're at. My personal digital vitae, if you want to call it that, is zenbenefiel.com. And you'll find a number of websites and other things that I do linked on the top of that, and activities that I'm engaged with as you scroll down the page.
Oh, so it is Benefiel.
Yes, it is.
Not Benefiel.
Yeah, well, if you sound the word, it's Benefiel.
Benefiel. Yeah.
Good fidelity. So what a name to be adopted with.
Yeah, that's a good, I like that name.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and I have...
how do you live up to that?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I love that people have so many creative names these days anyway. I mean, why not? Why not create your own name for yourself? And parents, why not get creative with names? You don't have to stick with the traditional.
I actually didn't create the name. It was, I prayed one day. I was in a conversation with a friend of mine during a full moon in 1988. And conversation fell quiet. I closed my eyes and went inside. I asked, who am I?
Yeah.
I heard his chair move. I turned to look at him. First words out of his mouth, you are Zendor.
See, this is amazing. So you've heard these voices. I've never had that experience. The only experience I've had similar.
That was his voice. I asked the question silently within, and he verbally gave me the answer.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I understand what you mean about the other. Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah. So, I've never had those types of experiences except for once when I think I was about 16 years old, and I had a palm tree plant in my bedroom. And it was I was very into New Age at that time, and very working hard to be in tune. And I was talking to the plant, right? Giving this a go. And then
it finally talked back
in a room with windows closed. And then the plant just went like that. And I got just those feelings throughout my body, butterflies, goosebumps. It was like, holy cow, what just happened?
Well, think about the quantum physics side of things. Everything has consciousness. If the space between the proton, electron, and neutron is 99%, then there's something there and it's interactive. We just need to be aware of it and start playing with it.
Yes. Zen, let's leave it right there. Thank you so much for being on Paranormal Now.
My pleasure, Alan. It was wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night. And thank you all for joining us on kgradb.com, the best in alternative talk radio. And of course, I want to thank our producer, Bill Skywatcher, who just does a phenomenal job every week on this show and so many others on KGRADB. And special thanks to Eric Brager and Race Hobbs. To all of you out there, live in the mystery.